It's crunch time at work and you need to bring wings to your workday. Visit redbull.com/gettingitdone and answer a couple questions about your work style to get a Spotify customized playlist tuned to your productivity. Plus, score a can of Red Bull on us while you go from to-do to done. And remember, Red Bull gives you wings. Supplies are limited. Terms apply. Visit the website for more information.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. You're listening to our latest episode for the week of February 10th, 2025. I'm joined today by our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Danielle Battaglia. Danielle covers our congressional delegation and the White House sometimes, and all things D.C. and how that relates to North Carolina, which during the Trump administration means a literal fire hose of news constantly. We're recording this on Friday afternoon. Who knows what'll happen by the time you listen on Monday, but maybe nothing. But this is what we know at this point in time. We're going to start talking about I talked about both DC and North Carolina. Obviously, what the federal government does affects the entire country. And there was a protest this past week, not just in Raleigh, but also in Raleigh, capitals across the country, against Trump, but also really against Elon Musk. I was out there with our colleague Avi Bajpai, and it went from a couple hundred to several hundred to well over 1,000 people marching on the sidewalk around the Capitol grounds ended up being for hours. The bulk of the protest was probably 1, that sort of thing. They went off a little bit to the legislative building and came back, but mostly at the Capitol, carrying a lot of different handmade signs, and most of them were against Elon Musk. And the people that we talked to, I'd say, what are you most upset about as far as Trump's actions? Because Trump has had all these series of executive orders. I mean, anything from what he said about just constant executive orders, constant statements. And it was sort of a variety of what people said. They're like, well, I don't like Trump anyway. But their big thing is that Elon Musk, who hasn't been elected, isn't confirmed by Congress, just this random private businessman is being given all this power and his lackeys. So Danielle is going to help us understand a little bit about how the federal government works and that intersection with politics. And we're only a couple of weeks now under the Trump administration. So Danielle, I mean, are you hanging in there with the news cycle?
I mean, I've had a lot of anxiety, and I believe that comes from just, like you said, it's a fire hose. I like that you just call them lackeys, by the way. But it's a fire hose, and it's constant, and it is hard for, I think, the average American, let alone people who, cover this on a day-to-day basis, to keep up with everything that the president is doing. I mean, we're recording this at 1:30. In 30 minutes, he's supposed to go into the Oval Office and sign a bunch of executive orders again before heading to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Republicans, where they're going to make a bunch of plans this weekend to come back and shoot out a bunch of orders again. And it's just like so much to keep up with. And the thing about President Trump is he riffs a lot, right? So like if he's not in front of a teleprompter, or even if he is in front of a teleprompter, you've covered his rallies, like he goes off script a lot. But we see in those moments where he isn't on a teleprompter, on script, like he says things top of mind. And then those things become executive orders and reality. And sometimes I don't know what became a plan because he said it just talking, or what became a plan because it was already in action. And there's been some of that I've been sorting through in North Carolina alone, like making Michael Whatley in charge of this organization to see if FEMA is reacting correctly. There's been rumblings that Michael Whatley didn't know he was about to take that role. So there's things like that you have to keep up with, on top of like everything he's undoing from the Biden administration, on top of every campaign promise that he made that he's trying to follow through on, plus all of the Elon Musk, checking checks and balances on our government. It's just so much.
I had almost forgotten about Watley with the Helene stuff. If people watched so Trump, you were greeted at the airport, and that includes Democratic Governor Josh Stein, and Watley was there. And if you look at the video of Trump talking to reporters, I'm like, does he even know who it's Stein's name or that he's a Democrat? Because Trump is like, Watley here and the governor. And I'm like, Stein, right there, and the way he was talking, he's like, Watley's going to fix this. And I remember thinking, how can the head of the state Republican Party have anything to do with Helene policy? Well, now he does.
And I would say he is now the head of the National Republican. I'm sorry.
Right,
Yeah.
He's
initially who he is. But yeah, so like all of a sudden, the guy in charge of the Republican Party is supposed to look into like, did FEMA act appropriately? The other thing from that meeting that was just so hilarious to me was he kept saying the congressmen, and I saw Congresswoman Virginia Fox just like storm up to the president, and ever since then he was like, the congressmen and women.
Is that how she got rules chair? Maybe she was already rules chair.
That was already under discussion.
Yeah,
She had a long storied career. I think, I mean, they did need a woman. They didn't have any women not in the cabinet, but in a chair position. So she was definitely under consideration to take that.
And she literally fell down the stairs and got up and kept going. That's last month only, I think that was.
She's tough as a $2 steak. That's what she said. Right. Yeah, that was actually, that was last month. I was going to say it was this month. It's all running together.
I know. So the Elon Musk stuff, a lot of it, and people think of like, if you don't live in a state capital area or nation's capital, you think of DC or Raleigh or whatever your capital is as some faraway place where people are different. And of course, that's not true. People are the same everywhere. And federal employees are just random people, just like, every listener, every person who talks about it, the same way state employees, they worry about money. They have kids in public schools, they go to Food Lion, all of this stuff, but they're also a target when people are removed and not realizing that. So maybe people that are further away, when you see something happen with federal employees, with what Trump is doing, you think that's some sort of other when it's really a lot. So if you can talk a little bit about how really just Northern Virginia, suburban Maryland, DC area is full of rank and file, just regular people who have jobs with the federal government, and their lives have already changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you just like take my church group, there's a bunch of early 40s, late 30s that hang out together. We're all having a Super Bowl party on Sunday. And it's hit all of us like in different ways. If you look at our group chat right now, like, some of them are stressing about, can I pay my employees? Some of them are stressing like, will I get paid? And like, it just hits you in different aspects of life. And it's people you wouldn't think of. Like one of them is a lobbyist for a university. And I didn't even think like, oh, you're going to be affected by this, but she very much is. And, we're like just doing daily check-ins now. Like, how are you doing mentally, emotionally, all that kind of thing. Just because like, these are your average day Americans who are trying to better, society, life, people. And suddenly just everything's impacted because of different federal dollars being stripped out of people's budgets, different federal workers being laid off or asking to take a layoff.
And it's not like they have these fat cat salaries, really, if you work for the government. I mean, there's, in theory, more job security, which is probably why people want to take the jobs, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you and I both grew up in the DC area. Like there's definitely something to be said for taking these federal jobs on. Like there is that security. There are some benefits to it. But yeah, I mean, like people commute 2 to 3 hours into DC every day to be able to afford to have a normal life because like it's just so expensive to live here and their salaries don't pay for them to live in this area. And so, yeah, it's like, average people trying to just go about life and do the work while making sacrifices for their family. And now they're being affected by this.
I think, everyone talks about the traffic on 95 really between Richmond and DC, but a lot of that is that people and rush hour in the DC area starts at like 3 o'clock because of all the guppies, really. I mean, military a little bit, but it's because you have to live further out to be able to afford to go in. So clearly, I mean, and we've both driven those areas a lot these past few years. So even if there are a lot of remote workers, not as the roads are still pretty crazy. So it's pretty clear there's plenty of people going into DC for work.
Yeah, I dreaded when they said to come back to work because I know traffic's going to be miserable.
Yeah. All right, we've got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about federal and North Carolina, including the terrible crash that happened recently in DC. We'll be right back.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Danielle Battaglia, our correspondent in Washington, D.C. Before the break, we were talking about just the fire hose of everything with Trump, federal workers, orders, everything that's going on. The other really big news out of DC recently, and tragic news, was the airliner Black Hawk helicopter crash that happened at National Airport, which Danielle ended up getting a clear view because about her apartment nearby. There's North Carolina connections with those that were on the aircraft, and this is something that's going to take a while. First, Danielle, who are the people from North Carolina that ended up being victims of the crash?
So I'll start with Rebecca Lobach, who was the Black Hawk pilot. Just everyone who's talked about her has talked about how wonderful she was, how much she wanted to be a Black Hawk pilot. Just really, really beloved and well known. And then there was a full crew of people that came out of Charlotte. Captain Jonathan Campos, Samuel Lilly, Ian Epstein, Wendy Schaefer, Denasia Elder. Ian Epstein's caught a lot of attention because he was well known for the talks he would give as a crew member throughout the flight. He's gone viral a few times for it. I was saying before the show, there was a prosecutor in Guilford County who talked about how she had him on his flight constantly when she went to visit, I think, one of her family members in Florida, and knew him by name, just remembered him because of his energy and how fun he would make the flights. And so I think that touched a lot of people's lives.
So what's the latest with anyone that knows anything about, aviation? I think knows the investigations into any sort of crash take a long time. So there aren't going to be any clear answers for a while. But what is there that we do know as far as where things stand?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of questions about what happened. I keep pointing this out to people who ask me because there's been a lot of conspiracy theories. So I live on the river. My view is the national airport with the Potomac River in the background. So the planes fly in basically onto my left side. So the left side of the Potomac River on the Virginia side. The military uses the left side of the river as kind of their super highway to get helicopters up and down to DC and into Virginia and Maryland. I think that's to cut down on the noise from air traffic over members of Congress's House is probably because they complain all the time about DCA traffic mixed with helicopter noise. But just air traffic noise pollution is a constant battle here in the district. So what was different with this crash is that there is runway 33, which is actually coming toward my apartment across the river. And that's where they were flying. The Black Hawk was supposed to not be above 200 feet. I was going to say miles, and I knew that was
which is very close to the ground.
I mean, if you drive on the 14th Street Bridge like I do, they've been getting so close to my car. But so they were supposed to be at 200 feet. The plane was at 325 feet. So they were obviously higher up than they were supposed to be. There's some questions about whether, because air traffic control repeatedly said, do you see the plane? And they said yes. So there's questions about whether they were looking at the plane that was following. But this isn't a runway that's used very often. I shouldn't say very often, but it's not used as commonly as the bigger one that is parallel with the river. So like they're not cutting across the helicopter's flight path as often. Since the crash, military traffic has pretty much completely died on the river. They're not using the river right now. I've seen them much higher in the sky over DC, Maryland. The Coast Guard, which has a helipad right under my window, has started flying around again, but like very seldom, doing laps around my apartment, which is fun. But just like not the normal traffic we see. I think DCA just said they're going to cut the amount of flights that are coming in and out for right now to try to get some of the congestion down. And then, obviously we've had 67 people. They weren't able to recover any of them in that initial moments after the wreck. You could see, and I took videos for Wichita's paper, which is our sister paper, and then the Charlotte Observer and the News and Observer, just nonstop, police lights everywhere you looked. They were at Bolling Air Force Base, which is across the river from me. They were at the airport in every direction. And they were trying to get to all of the victims of this crash, and they couldn't. So this week they've been in my line of sight trying to get their first plan was to get the airplane out of the river because they didn't have all the victims out. So they were trying to get to the ones that were stuck under the debris. Finally were able to do that. This morning they seem to be working on the Black Hawk. They've had a crane out at that crash site. And right before we recorded this, that crane went down. But that's something I see throughout the afternoon where they tend to put it down near the evening. We're about to get a winter storm today, and we'll have another one next week. So I don't know if that's playing into what they're doing, but it's just been nonstop working on that wreckage.
We'll see long-term how things change with, just how all the flight patterns involved, because it's not like it's going to get less busy and there's not a lot of open space up there, right? So
yeah, and somebody said they think this is only for congressmen. This is a major airport for the DC area. So I just want to make that known.
Huge. And the military obviously needs to fly around that too. So all right, well, let's move on to our picks for headliner of the week. I'll go first. My headliner is the first Council of State meeting of Governor Josh Stein's term, which I covered this past week. If you didn't read our Under the Dome newsletter on Sundays, which focuses on the governor, I talk more about the Council of State and how some people are the same. Stein just moved a few seats from Attorney General to the head of the table as governor. Budget Director Kristen Walker always sits at the table. And then Commissioner Troxler is still there. Commissioner Causey is still there. Secretary of State Marshall is still there. A bunch of new people, and how those meetings are going to go and how often they're going to be are going to change. So you could read more about that in our Under the Dome Sunday newsletter if you don't already subscribe. And it's a story too, so you can see it on the website. And our podcast goes out as Under the Dome newsletter every Monday. So that's my headliner, Council of State. Danielle, who or what is your headliner of the week?
I'm going to pick Senator Thom Tillis. He's from North Carolina. He has been making news nonstop, much to my ire, because I'm getting text alerts all hours of the day and night about him. But, he's this guy who's painted himself kind of as a moderate who will reach across the aisle to get bipartisan legislation done. And lately, he has fallen in line with Trump on every single one of his nominations for the cabinet and everything that falls into that category. So I think for some that self-describe as the MAGA crew, they're kind of confused on what he's doing because they don't see him being one of them, and kind of, they've censured him before. And they don't know whether to trust this like new side of Tillis. And then people who are more moderate are confused why he's taking this farther right stance all of a sudden. What was interesting to me is somebody pointed out, we're looking at nominees and not policy. And so once we get back into policy in Congress, will that change? Will he go back towards that moderate path? Or is he going to stick with this newfound far right? And, I'm digging into all of this, trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes and talking to people who know him. So it'll be interesting.
All right. The difference between governing and politicking, two very different things, really. All right. We are out of time. I'm Dawn Vaughan for Danielle Battaglia, producer Laura Brache. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.